She was only 7, but the fear she carried felt far older. 3 weeks without real sleep. 3 weeks of walking to school with her heart racing because she knew the threats were real. The danger was closing in, and every adult she begged for help turned away like her pain was invisible. So one freezing morning, she made a choice no child should ever face. She sought out the one man in town everyone whispered about, the quiet veteran with the sharp eyes, the man who walked with a limp, and the dog who never left his side. What happened next didn't just protect her. It exposed the darkness that school officials, parents, and even the police had ignored for far too long. Before we dive into Aaliyah's story, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city and country in the comments. Texas, London, Manila, Sydney. This message about courage, justice, and standing up for the vulnerable deserves to be heard everywhere. And don't forget to share this video, leave a comment, and subscribe so stories like this can reach more people who need them. All right, let's go back to where it all began. 3 weeks in the dark, winter winds carved through the streets of Buffalo, turning every rooftop and alley into a pale, breathless world of drifting snow. 7-year-old Aaliyah Brooks, a thin black girl with soft brown skin and tightly braided hair that her mother styled each morning, lived with a constant tremor beneath her ribs. Once joyful, she had been the kind of child who drew animals with wings and saved crumbs for the sparrows outside their window. But 3 weeks had reshaped her into a shadow of herself, as if something had reached inside her chest and quietly taken pieces away. She lived with her mother, Monica Brooks, a tall, gently built woman in her mid-30s whose warm, almond-brown skin and tired hazel eyes revealed years of night shifts as a hospital nurse. Monica carried herself with quiet strength, but exhaustion softened her shoulders. Still, she always tried to make their small apartment feel safe, even when safety no longer belonged to them. At Jefferson Elementary, 3 older boys had made Aaliyah their daily target. Logan Parker, a blonde 5th grader with a stocky frame and a smirk that rarely left his face, loved showing his dominance. Bryce Turner, wiry and sharp-eyed, followed Logan like a shadow, eager to impress. Ethan Morris, the tallest of the 3, rarely spoke, but his mocking laughter lingered like cold breath on the back of Aaliyah's neck. They shoved her in hallways, knocked her books from her arms, kicked her lunchbox across the cafeteria floor. When she bent to retrieve anything, their laughter rose around her as if the whole school were in on the cruelty. Each insult pierced her like ice splinters. But the worst part came after the bell rang. Logan and Bryce trailed behind her just far enough to pretend innocence, just near enough to whisper threats that clung to her spine. "We know where you live. Tomorrow's gonna hurt worse." At night, Aaliyah dreamed of endless corridors, echoing footsteps, and hands she could never see. She woke trembling, her pajama top soaked with sweat, afraid to close her eyes again. Then, the nightmare widened beyond school walls. One afternoon, while trudging home through melting slush, she noticed a black sedan idling at the corner. The next day, it was parked a little closer. On the third, the window slid down, revealing a teenage boy, pale, narrow-faced, with short dark hair and unnervingly flat eyes. His smile was thin, practiced. "I know where you live," he said softly. The words burrowed deep, colder than the wind. Aaliyah's legs moved before her mind caught up, carrying her in a frantic run all the way home. She couldn't remember breathing until she shut the apartment door behind her. Monica saw the bruises, the tremble in her daughter's hands, the way she flinched at sudden sounds. Her worry grew into desperation. She confronted the school principal, a round-faced man more concerned with paperwork than children, who insisted it was normal conflict, recommending that Aaliyah toughen up. The school counselor, a thin woman with clipped speech, dismissed Aaliyah as overly sensitive. That night, at the police station, the officer on duty, a middle-aged man with a potbelly and a practiced, indifferent tone, listened to Monica's report and shrugged. "No crime here. If it gets serious, call back." They left in falling snow, their footsteps filling with white as quickly as they were made. Later, Aaliyah lay awake, staring at water stains on the ceiling. Through the thin apartment walls, she heard Monica whisper into the phone, voice breaking. "I can't protect her. The school won't listen. The police won't help. What if something happens before they care?" Those words curled inside Aaliyah's chest like a small, frightened animal. She knew her mother was strong, but strength meant little when the world refused to hear you. She felt alone, floating in a storm no one else could feel. Yet amid that despair, a memory flickered. A few weeks earlier, Monica had taken her to a small riverside cafe near the frozen docks. There, Aaliyah had seen a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, with wind-reddened skin and a dark navy coat. His gait was uneven, his left knee stiffened slightly as he moved. His jaw was strong, marked by short dark stubble, and his eyes were a deep, serious brown that softened only when he stepped aside to help an elderly woman through the door. Beside him sat a German shepherd, large and disciplined, coat a mix of black and tan, wearing a harness labeled "Service Dog, Do Not Pet." The dog's posture radiated calm control, as if every sound in the room passed first through him. The man rarely spoke, but kindness passed through his actions like a quiet current. Aaliyah remembered thinking, if anyone could keep danger away, it might be him. Now, in the howl of a winter storm, that thought returned with startling clarity. No one else was coming, not teachers, not police. So, a 7-year-old girl made a decision no child should ever have to make. Before sunrise, while Buffalo still groaned under a fierce blizzard, Aaliyah dressed in her thickest purple coat. She tucked her small plastic dinosaur into her pocket for courage. Monica, exhausted after a brutal night shift, slept deeply. Aaliyah slipped outside. The wind slapped her cheeks, snow stung her skin like 1,000 needles. Streetlights glowed dimly beneath the swirling white, and the world felt vast, unfriendly, and far too quiet. Step by step, she walked toward the cafe, the last place she had seen the man with the steady gaze and the heroic dog. Near the harbor, through the curtains of snow, a low bark broke the silence. Not loud, not threatening, more like a question spoken into the wind. Ranger, the German shepherd, stood on the brick steps of a small red house, ears lifted, gaze fixed on the tiny figure trudging toward him. Aaliyah froze, her heart hammered with fear and hope tangled together. From inside the house, Noah Miller, the former Navy SEAL with the damaged knee and the unshakable calm, reached for the kitchen light. It was unclear whether he had heard the faint, childlike struggle carried on the storm's breath. That answer lay buried beneath the snow, waiting for the next chapter. The soldier in the snowstorm, snow hammered against the windows of the red brick house, blurring the world beyond into shifting white. Inside, warmth pooled around the small kitchen where Noah Miller stood motionless, still holding the wooden spoon he had been stirring oatmeal with. His tall frame, wrapped in a navy winter coat even indoors, looked carved from something resilient. Broad shoulders, steady posture, dark stubble edging a jaw that had once taken the blow of a rifle stock during a chaotic extraction mission overseas. The ache in his left knee flared whenever storms rolled in, a reminder of the night he had carried a wounded teammate across a ridge while gunfire chased them. Noah had lived alone for years, save for Ranger, his 5-year-old German shepherd. Ranger's coat was a thick mix of black and tan, his chest wide, his stance confident without being aggressive. He had a disciplined stillness, the kind only a service dog trained beside special operations could possess. He trusted routines, he trusted Noah, and when something disrupted that rhythm, Ranger always sensed it first. The dog had left his water bowl untouched and planted himself at the front window. His ears, tall and sharp like small radar dishes, leaned forward, his golden brown eyes fixed on the storm outside. Then that low, deliberate bark came, a single sound, not of excitement, but alert. Noah set the spoon down. He recognized that tone. Ranger was not warning him of danger. It was something else, something fragile. He stepped toward the window, and Ranger moved to his side, leaning forward with anticipation. Through the shifting curtains of snow, a small purple shape materialized, unsteady, almost swallowed by the storm. A child. Noah's heartbeat tightened. His body reacted before his thoughts formed. Years of training had honed that instinct. He grabbed his gloves from the hook near the door and stepped out onto the porch as Ranger bounded ahead. The cold hit Noah instantly, a sharp slap of winter that clawed its way through layers. But the sight before him struck harder. Aaliyah Brooks, the small girl he had seen once outside a cafe, stood trembling on his walkway. Her purple coat was dusted with snow, her braids stiff with ice, her scarf slipping from one shoulder. Up close, she looked even smaller, thin wrists peeking from coat sleeves, cheeks raw from the wind, wide eyes showing fear that went deeper than the storm. Ranger slowed as he approached her, lowering his head slightly in a gesture of calm. He sniffed the air, then her gloves, his breath fogging into tiny clouds. The girl hugged herself and spoke, her voice brittle. "Sir, you were at the cafe near the river, right?" Her lower lip shook not only from cold. Noah saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the way children looked only when they had carried fear too heavy for their size. "Yes," Noah said gently, "I remember you. Come inside before you freeze." He ushered her through the door, steadying her by the shoulders. They were too light, too tense. Ranger followed, but positioned himself squarely in front of the door as soon as it closed, his body forming a silent barrier, as if he already understood this child needed protection. Inside, the heat wrapped around them. Noah knelt to help her unbutton her coat, careful not to crowd her. Her clothes underneath were damp, her fingers stiff. "Sit," he said softly, pulling out a chair near the heater. "Let me get something warm." He poured steaming chocolate into a mug patterned with faded blue anchors, a relic from his Navy days. Aaliyah wrapped her hands around it, absorbing the heat like a starving creature. Noah sat opposite her, his frame filling the small kitchen. Up close, his face carried subtle signs of a man who had lived through things he seldom spoke of. Small scars along the cheekbone, a faint ridge near the eyebrow where shrapnel once grazed him. But his eyes, though serious, held a steady warmth that children often trusted instinctively. "Tell me what happened," he said. "All of it." Aaliyah hesitated. Her breath hitched. Then the words spilled out. About Logan, the blonde boy who shoved her, Bryce, thin and sharp-tongued, Ethan, always laughing at her pain. About the hallways, the cafeteria, the books knocked from her hands. About being followed home. And finally, the black sedan. The pale teenager with cold eyes. When she described the smile the driver gave her, Noah felt a slow, simmering weight settle behind his sternum. He had seen that expression before, in men who enjoyed holding power over those who couldn't fight back. No child should know that kind of fear. He did not interrupt, not once. He let her speak until every word had drained out of her. When she finished, she pulled her knees to her chest, hugging them tightly. Ranger moved closer and rested his head against her shin. The girl blinked in surprise, then carefully placed her small hand on his neck. His fur was thick and warm, and for the first time in weeks, something softened inside her. A tiny giggle escaped, quiet, shaky, but real. Noah's jaw eased. "That's a good sound," he said. She glanced up at him. Are you mad at me for coming here?" "No," Noah replied, voice deep but tender. "I'm angry that no one listened to you. I'm angry that you had to walk through a storm for someone to finally hear you, but not angry at you." Her eyes glistened, and she nodded, as if that single answer had given her permission to breathe again. Noah leaned forward slightly. "Aaliyah, I need to know your school's name, the street you walk home on, everything you remember about that black car." She told him, slowly but clearly. Ranger shifted at her feet, letting out a soft exhale, as if confirming the seriousness of her story. Noah reached down and brushed the dog's ear. "We'll figure this out," he murmured. He didn't yet know how, but he knew this: he would not turn away as others had. The storm outside roared, pelting the windows like fists, but inside the small house something had changed, an unspoken pact, forged in fear and answered with resolve. Aaliyah took another sip of chocolate. Ranger nudged her knee again, and she smiled wider this time. For the first time in 3 weeks, she felt a sliver of safety, and Noah Miller, staring at the swirling storm beyond the glass, understood that everything from this moment forward would be different. Tracks in the snow, the storm had softened overnight, leaving Buffalo wrapped in a thick blanket of white that muted every sound except the crunch of boots over frozen ground. In that pale morning hush, Noah Miller walked beside Aaliyah Brooks, keeping a natural distance that would not attract attention. His tall frame cast a long shadow over the snow-covered sidewalk, while Ranger, the disciplined German shepherd, trotted at Aaliyah's opposite side. The dog's breath rose in steady bursts, each exhale forming a brief cloud before dissolving into the cold air. To any passerby, they looked like an unusual but harmless trio, a withdrawn former soldier escorting a neighbor's child to school. But Noah's eyes, dark and alert beneath his knit cap, absorbed everything. Every idling engine, every alleyway, every cluster of footprints that seemed out of place. Years of reconnaissance had carved habits into him that no civilian life could erase. Aaliyah remained quiet at the entire walk, but her shoulders loosened slightly whenever Ranger glanced up at her. She had not slept well, yet the presence of the large service dog beside her offered something close to bravery. As they approached Jefferson Elementary, the staff parking lot was already filling with cars. A thin woman in a red wool coat hurried toward the entrance. She recognized Aaliyah and forced a tight smile. This was Mrs. Penworthy, the front office secretary. She was in her early 50s, short and pear-shaped, with frizzy gray-brown hair framing a face always flushed from the cold. Though usually cheerful with parents, she avoided conflict with near-religious devotion. Her tone was airy when she addressed Noah. "Oh, you must be a neighbor. Poor thing," she said, gesturing toward Aaliyah. "Children can be spirited at this age." Noah watched her walk away, noticing how her hands fidgeted with her scarf, as though she feared saying anything too direct. The school was full of adults like her, he realized, people who saw trouble but stepped around it. Inside the school gates, the principal emerged. Principal Robert Marks was a tall man in his early 40s, lean in a way that suggested nervous energy more than fitness. His neatly parted brown hair and polished shoes contrasted with the dark circles beneath his eyes, as if he slept poorly but pretended otherwise. His handshake with Noah was firm, though his eyes darted briefly toward Ranger before returning to the facade of confidence he wore like a pressed shirt. "I appreciate your concern," Principal Marks said, voice carefully measured. "But we can't escalate situations without clear evidence. Children tease each other. It's unpleasant but normal." Noah held his gaze, expression neutral. Is following a child home normal? Marks's jaw tightened, but he quickly rearranged his features. "We have procedures. If anything rises to actionable levels, we document it. Until then, the best approach is resilience training." Aaliyah stepped behind Ranger, half hiding. Ranger responded by shifting, so his large frame shielded her from Marks's line of sight. Noah didn't argue. Arguments were wasted on people who had already decided what they were willing to see. By noon, he had mapped the entire perimeter of the school in his mind: entry points, choke points, blind spots. By afternoon, he and Ranger relocated to a cafe across from Alicia's usual route home, a small place with steamed windows and the smell of cinnamon drifting through the door. They sat near the front, Noah holding a newspaper he wasn't reading, Ranger lying beneath the table but alert. When the school bell rang, the street filled with bundled children. Bursts of laughter carried over the snow, but Noah's attention narrowed. There they were, Logan Parker and Bryce Turner. Logan strode with exaggerated swagger, his blonde hair sticking from beneath a knit cap. Bryce followed close, his thin mouth twisted into a smirk. Noah noticed how other kids moved aside to avoid them. Aaliyah exited moments later, scanning the crowd anxiously. She walked fast, head down, backpack clutched with both hands. Logan elbowed Bryce, and together they drifted behind her, keeping the same predatory distance Aaliyah had described. Ranger's ears lifted. Noah didn't move but lowered his newspaper slightly, observing everything through the reflection of the cafe window. Ranger emitted a quiet rumble, so soft the barista didn't hear, but Noah did. It vibrated through the dog's chest like a warning. Then something else caught Ranger's attention. A black sedan, same model Aaliyah had mentioned, idled near the corner, exhaust trailing into the cold air. The windows were tinted, but Noah could make out a figure shifting behind the steering wheel. Ranger's low growl deepened. "Easy," Noah murmured, touching the dog's shoulder, but he didn't take his eyes off the car. After Aaliyah reached the intersection, Logan and Bryce peeled away. The sedan stayed put, engine running. Noah watched until she disappeared safely down the next block. Only then did the sedan roll forward, slow and deliberate, the way predators circle long after prey has gone. That night, Noah set to work. At midnight, bundled in a heavy coat and carrying a backpack of equipment, he moved along Aaliyah's route with Ranger at his side. The snow made their footprints crisp, but Noah avoided leaving obvious trails. At street signs and traffic posts, he affixed tiny cameras, models small enough to hide inside bolt casings or beneath metal lips. Ranger waited patiently each time, his breath clouding the air. Later, at home, Noah connected the data to his old laptop. He typed in the partial plate number Aaliyah had remembered. The search returned a match. Travis Holloway, age 17, a high school junior with a history of complaints, none ever processed. His disciplinary file was suspiciously clean for someone who appeared repeatedly in informal reports. A coincidence only to the naive. His father, Captain Leonard Holloway, was a bulky man in his late 40s, with graying blonde hair and a reputation for maintaining tight connections within the police department. Noah remembered him vaguely, a man who enjoyed being listened to but never listening back. The following week grew more tense. One afternoon, snow fell in thick, wet flakes that clung to coats and eyelashes. Aaliyah hurried down the street, her boots slapping the icy pavement. Ranger walked slightly behind her, Noah across the road for perspective. Then the black sedan slid into view. It crawled up beside her, matching her steps. The window lowered just 2 inches, enough for a pale face to appear in the gap. Travis's smile was thin, almost pleased with itself. Before he could speak, Ranger surged forward, body taut, a deep growl tearing through the icy air. His fangs flashed, controlled but unmistakably protective. Travis jerked back. The window shot up. On the opposite sidewalk, Noah raised his phone. The camera rolled. His stance was solid, unyielding. His eyes locked on the car with the cold precision of a man who had once stared down far worse. The sedan peeled away, tires spitting slush. But this time, they had the footage, and Noah intended to use it. Confrontation in the ice. The Monday morning sky hung low over Buffalo, a pale sheet of silver pressing down on the rooftops. Snow sat heavy on the schoolyard fences, gathered in small drifts along the sidewalks, and clung stubbornly to the branches of barren trees. Though the storm had passed, the cold remained sharp enough to sting exposed skin. It was a morning built for silence, but inside Jefferson Elementary, tension simmered beneath the hum of old fluorescent lights. Noah Miller walked through the front doors quietly, his navy coat still dusted with frost. His jaw was set, the same tight line it had taken during rescue missions when the stakes were high and time was unforgiving. Ranger, the large German shepherd, padded at his side, his paws nearly soundless on the linoleum floor. His harness gleamed faintly, each strap fitted perfectly across his muscular frame. Behind Noah came Monica Brooks, her tall figure wrapped in a beige coat that did little to hide her trembling hands. Her hazel eyes, usually soft with warmth, were clouded by exhaustion and weeks of suppressed fear. She had tied her hair back in a bun, but loose strands framed her tense expression. Today, she was not a worn-out nurse dragging herself through another shift. Today, she was a mother ready to fight. With her walked 2 other parents Noah had contacted, people who had quietly mentioned their own children being bullied, but had never been brave enough to confront the system. Sarah Whitmore was one of them, a slender woman in her early 40s with sandy blonde hair tied in a neat twist. Her pale skin carried faint freckles, and her soft posture contrasted sharply with the steel in her blue-gray eyes. Her son had been targeted by the same boys who tormented Aaliyah. Beside her, Anthony Reyes, a stocky man with deep olive skin and a neatly trimmed beard, wore an expression carved from frustration and sleepless nights. His daughter had stopped wanting to come to school months ago. Anthony's broad shoulders and tight jaw revealed the simmering anger of someone who had been dismissed too many times. The secretary, Mrs. Penworthy, peeked up from behind her desk. Her eyes widened at the sight of Ranger, but she swallowed her complaint, instead giving a weak smile that collapsed under Noah's unwavering gaze. They were ushered into Principal Robert Marks's office. The room smelled faintly of lemon polish and paper, a space that had seen countless parent conferences, though rarely ones that mattered. Marks himself stood near his desk, tall and stiff, his carefully parted brown hair unmoving despite the tension he tried to hide. He gestured toward the chairs. "Let's discuss this calmly," he offered. "Whatever concerns you have, we can address through appropriate channels." Monica opened her mouth, her voice trembling. "My daughter." Noah's hand rested gently on her arm, steadying her. With his other hand, he placed a small USB drive on the principal's desk. "I think we should start with this." Marks hesitated only a second before inserting it into his computer. The screen flickered, and then the first video appeared. Logan shoving Aaliyah so hard she slid across the hallway floor. Bryce kicking her lunchbox away, Ethan laughing in the background. Then footage from the street, the black sedan rolling slowly behind her, Travis Holloway's pale face glancing toward the sidewalk. The room changed temperature. Mark swallowed. I wasn't aware of..." "You were told," Noah said calmly, though his voice carried the weight of something that allowed no argument. "Multiple times." Marks looked from him to Monica to the other parents, searching for a shield that no longer existed. "We can handle this internally." Noah's expression didn't change, but his voice dipped lower, colder. This is no longer internal. A child was stalked for weeks. If you fail to report it, I'll ensure the district superintendent knows exactly why. Ranger shifted, positioning himself between the door and the group, his posture calm but unmistakably protective. The dog's presence alone felt like a verdict. A knock interrupted the tension. The door opened to reveal Detective Samuel Drake, Noah's old colleague from the police department. Drake was in his mid-40s, tall with a narrow build, a trimmed dark beard frosted with gray, and eyes that had seen far too many cases buried under politics. He carried a thin folder in one gloved hand. Mark stiffened. "Detective, why are you—" Drake lifted the folder slightly. "Following up on a report. Several, actually. Ones that were never fully processed." He placed the folder on the desk. Inside lay complaint records, partial reports, and warnings about Travis Holloway that had been quietly set aside. Mark's color drained. Anthony Reyes exhaled sharply, anger melting into vindication. Sarah clasped her hands over her purse, eyes wet but shining with relief. The adults left the building more united than they had entered. Hours later, as the winter sun dipped low, Noah and Ranger met Aaliyah out at her school. She walked between them, her small hands gripping Ranger's fur. Snowflakes settled on her braids. They reached her street when the black sedan screeched into view. Noah reacted instantly, stepping in front of Aaliyah, his voice cut through the air. "Stay behind me!" Ranger lunged half a step forward, body low, chest vibrating with a controlled growl taught through years of discipline. The car swerved as if to intimidate, but the moment it edged closer, Ranger's bark exploded. Deep, thunderous, unwavering. A patrol car flashed its lights from the next block. The sedan halted. Its driver's door opened slowly. Travis Holloway stepped out, shoulders hunched, face pale beneath the street lamp glow. For the first time, Aaliyah saw him not as a looming nightmare, but as a frightened boy whose cruelty had run out of shadows to hide in. His hands shook as the officer commanded, "Step forward, now." And he did. Winter breaks. The last weeks of winter settled over Buffalo like a heavy wool blanket, soft but unyielding. Snow still clung to the gutters and lay in pale ridges along the sidewalks, though patches of dark pavement had begun to emerge. The air held a gentler bite now, as if the season itself was finally loosening its grip. But something else had shifted even more noticeably. The city seemed to be watching, listening, paying attention. After the confrontation on that icy street, nothing improved overnight. Yet the machinery of justice, slow but relentless, began to turn. Travis Holloway, the 17-year-old whose pale face and cold smirk had stalked Aaliyah through her nightmares, now appeared in court with trembling hands and a posture stripped of arrogance. His once neatly trimmed dark hair hung limp against his forehead, and the crisp varsity jacket he usually wore had been replaced with a plain gray sweatshirt that seemed a size too big. He was charged with harassment, reckless endangerment, and threatening a minor. The judge, a middle-aged woman named Judge Naomi Fletcher, tall with close-cropped silver curls and a calm, penetrating gaze, ordered mandatory counseling, weekly supervision, and a strict restraining requirement. Judge Fletcher was known across Erie County for her no-nonsense demeanor and her insistence on accountability, shaped by her own childhood spent watching her younger brother endure months of unchecked bullying. Her verdict was measured but firm, and for the first time in many weeks, Monica exhaled a breath that didn't shake. Travis's father, Councilman Harold Holloway, a broad-shouldered man with careful salt-and-pepper hair and a practiced smile, tried to intervene. He spoke in long, rehearsed sentences about misunderstanding, exaggeration, boys making mistakes. But this time, the shield of influence he relied on failed him. Video evidence, sworn witnesses, and district oversight made sure of that. Every door he tried to open shut hard in his face. At Jefferson Elementary, sweeping change followed. An emergency parent assembly was called. New hallway monitors were assigned. Anonymous reporting lines were posted in bright yellow on classroom doors. Teachers received updated training on intervention protocols. And 3 boys, Logan, Bryce, and Ethan, finally faced consequences. Logan, usually the swaggering ringleader with gel-slicked blonde hair and a smirk that rarely faded, now kept his eyes lowered as he listened to the disciplinary board. Bryce, tall and lanky with brown curls, shifted anxiously in his seat. Ethan, red-haired with freckles dusted across his nose, stayed rigid, almost frozen by the weight of his choices. All three were required to attend behavioral counseling, complete volunteer service projects, and remain under supervision for the rest of winter term. Meanwhile, Aaliyah began to thaw. Her small frame, once hunched with dread, straightened a little more each day. The shadows beneath her eyes faded. Nightmares loosened their hold. She returned to the little sketchbook she used to carry everywhere. On Saturday mornings, she brought it to the Riverfront Cafe, her safe place, and sat with a hot cocoa while Ranger rested at her feet. She drew pictures of winter scenes, snowdrifts shaped like soft mountains, starry skylines over the frozen lake, and always a tall man walking with a slight hitch in his left leg, beside a German shepherd with proud ears and steady eyes. Above one drawing, in crooked letters, she wrote, "Mr. Noah and Ranger, my protectors." For Noah, these small rituals bore a healing weight he didn't expect. He had seen towns crumble, missions fail, and brothers in arms never return home. Loss had carved quiet shadows into his smile, and the ache in his knee was a constant reminder of the day an explosion buried him under a collapsed outpost. But now, each time Aaliyah looked up at him with trust, not fear, something inside him settled. There was a peace he had forgotten how to feel. Ranger, dignified and focused, handled his new role with the solemn dedication of a seasoned guardian. At the start of each morning, he would settle by the door, tail thumping lightly, waiting to see if escorting duty was on the schedule. When Aaliyah arrived, bundled in her purple coat, Ranger fell into perfect step beside her, ever watchful. And every afternoon when they returned from school, he nudged her hand until she patted the side of his harness, a ritual that had become their own silent handshake. By early March, Buffalo's winter softened, icicles shrank, roofs dripped steadily, the river cracked its frozen shell, and at Jefferson Elementary's end-of-year assembly, Aaliyah stood before her class. The gym smelled of old varnish and hot cocoa from the concession stand. Folding chairs squeaked, parents huddled in coats along the back wall. Aaliyah stepped up to the microphone, her braids tied with blue ribbons that swayed gently as she breathed. Her voice was small at first, but clear. "I used to be really scared," she said. "I thought no one would listen. But I learned something. Asking for help doesn't make you weak. It means you're brave. If someone hurts you, tell someone. Tell them again. Keep telling them until someone listens." Murmurs rippled across the gym, soft, emotional, proud. In the back, Noah stood with arms folded loosely, leaning against the wall. Ranger sat at his feet, ears perked toward Aaliyah's words. Noah avoided attention by instinct, but when Aaliyah glanced his way and lifted a thumb in his direction, he touched 2 fingers to the brim of his cap in quiet acknowledgement. A rare smile pulled gently at the corner of his mouth. Winter didn't end when the snow melted from the rooftops. It ended the moment Aaliyah no longer walked with her shoulders curled inward. It ended when she stepped out of school, flanked by Noah on one side and Ranger on the other, the 3 sets of footprints marking a path through slush and fading frost. Above them, clouds still hovered gray and heavy, but the space beneath, where they walked, felt warmer, brighter, and infinitely safer. In the quiet after everything, when the snow finally melted from the rooftops and the world breathed a little easier, one truth remained. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest prayers. A 7-year-old girl whispered for help, and in ways she could never predict, her prayer was answered. Not with thunder in the sky or angels descending, but through a wounded soldier and a loyal dog who stepped into her life at the very moment she needed protection most. Some people call it coincidence, others might call it chance, but those who have lived through both the hard nights and the hopeful mornings know better. Grace arrives in many forms. Sometimes it wears a navy coat, sometimes it has 4 paws and a steady heartbeat, and sometimes it looks like the courage of a child who refuses to stop believing that someone will care enough to listen. May this story remind us that God's miracles are not always grand or loud. Often they appear in ordinary places, through ordinary people, carrying extraordinary love. And in our everyday lives, on quiet mornings, in crowded schools, in uncertain seasons, we are invited to be part of that miracle for someone else. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs a little hope today. Leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and help these messages reach hearts that may be waiting in silence. May God watch over you, guide your steps, and bless your home with peace and protection, just as he watched over Aliyah when winter seemed its darkest.